Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to This Week in Organic. The observant of you will notice that actually I am not David Bain, it's Lawrence O'Toole. I'm the CEO of Analytics SEO, and I've stepped in this afternoon at extremely short notice, and yeah, unfortunately David's wife has been taken ill, so he's disappeared off and has left me in control of the whole This Week in Organic studio, and it's pretty daunting to say the least. There's lots of digital buttons here that I'm in danger of pressing the wrong things, but I am joined by three fantastic guests, so let me first introduce you, and then we can talk about all the great topics that have been happening this week and try and give you guys some really actionable insights that you can take away to try and help you be more successful in day-to-day jobs. So let me first go to Andrew Shotland. Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning or afternoon, wherever you guys are. So I'm Andrew Shotland. I'm the president/founder of localseoguide.com. We write a lot about local search and SEO. We offer SEO services to large and small businesses of all shapes and sizes.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. And over to you next, Bill.
I'm Bill Hunt with Back Azimuth Consulting, and our primary focus is helping companies figure out how to do search globally, integrated into the digital process, as well as a lot of data mining around keywords and integrating that into content marketing.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Bill. And last but not least, to Rebecca.
Hi there, Lawrence, and everybody out there. My name is Rebecca Lieb. I am an analyst and a strategic advisor. I've done deep work in organic SEO. I've written a book on it. But right now, my focus in both research and client advisory work is content marketing and content strategy, obviously not unrelated to search at all.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Rebecca. And you'll notice I've stepped in for David. I'm not dressed for the occasion, but I have a fantastic fall t-shirt on this afternoon, which I think is perfect for the occasion. So hopefully between three of us will be fantastic anyway, and I'll try and press all the right buttons in the right order and try not to balls things up for all our listeners out there who've tuned in on a Friday afternoon. So let's crack on. Thank you again for joining us, and these are the topics we'll be discussing this week. Will app content optimization become an essential part of SEO? What's the future of YouTube now that it's part of a smaller Google? Is Pinterest a social media platform or an e-commerce opportunity? And are these the 7 social media platforms that could explode before 2016? Welcome to This Week in Organic, episode number 12. I'm meant to press a button at something.
This Week's in Organic. Live from London on thisweekinorganic.com.
Perfect. It's amazing what you can get on Fiverr these days. So broadcasting live from London, you're watching This Week in Organic, the weekly show that debates the ramifications of the latest SEO and content marketing news. Sign up to watch the next show at thisweekinorganic.com. So hello and welcome. I'm Lawrence O'Toole, the CEO of Analytics SEO. Each week, this show is normally hosted by David, and he's joined by plenty of knowledgeable folks, opinionated folks that are trying to discuss the latest happenings and anything that impacts organic traffic. So we're delighted that these guys can join us, and we want all the listeners to get involved too. So please use the hashtag TWIO on Twitter. That's TWIO. And if you're watching live, your thoughts will magically appear in the chat box to your right-hand side. So we found out a little bit about our guests. Just a quick recap. What's really caught your eye this week, Andrew?
Well, we're looking at 2 kind of major things that have been catching our eye. About a week ago, there was a big update to Google's local results, where they started showing only what's called 3 packs, so 3 local listings for local search results, and on desktop and mobile, and that's, as far as we can tell, has been rolled out globally. And so right now we're trying to assess the impact for both location-based businesses as well as, let's just say, directory-type businesses that rank in the organic version of those results.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and I thought you might want to talk about that, so hopefully we'll get time before, I know you've got to leave the show early today, so let's try and make sure we can get to you with some really practical tips for people out there optimizing their local business websites. What about yourself, Bill?
For me, I think one of the big things is a lot of people started getting notices over the past 2 weeks about their href language tags being sort of wonky. And, I think there's not a lot of information out there for people on how and why to use these and some of the errors. And I think that's something that, especially if you have a global business and you have multiple English language or Spanish language sites, something people should definitely look at. So I think that's a big one that many people aren't looking at. And then the other, I think it is sort of what do we start to do with video, which is one of the topics we had today. I'm seeing a lot of people actually confused. Do we do it on Facebook? Do we do it on YouTube? Do we do it on our own site? And sort of an interesting question of people, what are the SEO ramifications of any of those options?
Okay, thanks, Phil. We'll probably get to that one quite early in the show. And Rebecca, what's caught your eye this week?
I'm going to chime in and agree with Phil on video. Where does it live? How is it going to be optimized? It's playing an ever bigger part of content strategies. In fact, I'm working with businesses who, when they talk about content strategies, are talking about video endlessly. SEO, not at all. So it's getting to be a question of weighting the one out against the other and against prioritizing what's going to matter in a strategy and what's going to hopefully not eclipse the other in the content strategies that I'm working on.
Oh, perfect. So how do we help people out there get a joined up approach, which is going to help them secure budget to do the right content marketing strategy, which it's both the SEO metrics as well as the content marketing and engagement metrics that are important. Okay, well, let's touch on some of that, but let's go with the topics David set up for us. I hope you guys have done plenty of homework because I've had about 15 minutes preparation for all this. So I'll start with the ABCs, and that probably takes us initially to domain names. I'm sure you've heard the news at the beginning of this week that Google announced it was creating a new holding company called Alphabet, and moving much of its creative and development business to the new company, leaving Google with its original search business. The domain name for the new business is abc.xyz, not abc.wtf, which I believe someone said Microsoft has registered. So I'm not sure what the WTF stands for anyway. But the first question, will this open the floodgates to not .coms or non.coms becoming really common? Who wants to jump in first on that?
Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to say the answer is maybe. I don't see why it would, other than maybe say people might be like, oh, Google's got one of these, why don't we? I think the whole alternate domain name stuff is just a big who cares, honestly. I don't think it's significant in the near term, at least for web properties or internet properties.
Okay. Anyone else want to chime in on that with a different opinion, or is do you think everyone will be running, all the local businesses will be calling up their SEO agencies saying, hey, Google's got an XYZ, should we have an XYZ?
Definitely not local businesses. Those guys are so far behind.
Okay.
But on the other hand, local businesses are going to want to perhaps own their locality. So the .nyc domain where I live here in New York is doing pretty well. But I think that's more about reserving a domain so that somebody doesn't take it over and you don't have to deal with those concerns than it is going to be for real branding. Because if you are burrito.com, you don't need to be burrito.xyz or ddf or any other kind of suffix. You're going to show up in results, presumably for that .com, because you've invested heavily in it. Probably the first domain you bought is probably the primary domain, and I think .com and secondarily .net are going to be with us as the primary domains for a good long while. It's simple branding, and it's the way that consumers are trained to think about the web.
Okay, so if I came to you, if I was a small business starting up, I don't know, a local deli or something just down the road here in Twickenham, and I decided I'd come up with a good name, and what would your advice be to me about a domain name strategy? Let's just say that someone's beating me to the .com. What would your advice be?
.net, .uk before you start started looking at .twickenham, which I don't think exists yet.
I'm not sure. It's certainly quite long to type, that's for sure. Any other advice from you guys, Bill, Andrew?
Well, I think looking at how might people think of you. So I see some people in the U.S. will put LLC in there because the name is missing. If you're talking about a sandwich shop or something, can you put something like that in there? And I think that what are they going to use it for? And I think it ties into a couple of the other conversations, and exactly as Rebecca said around your content strategy. What do you want the website to do for you? And that brings up a great point. I mean, that was one of the things Google was mocked for, is they didn't check to see if alphabet.com was actually available, and things like that. So I think those are things we need to look at. I mean, I'm seeing big brands actually go to .brand name, and I'm just waiting for some of them to let their .com domains expire, because they're moving everything over to the .brand. So I think there's some issues, and I think if you look at it, if you're a small business, what makes sense? How might people think of you if you can't get the .com? And I think, as Rebecca said, are more people, especially in the UK case, thinking something might actually be a .co.uk or some other appropriate country-level domain?
Okay, so I suppose the honest answer to this, whether you're a big business or a small business, there's no one size fits all. It really does depend on where you are as a business, what your branding and corporate and your content marketing strategy is, and of course what's available. Unless Andrew, you've got any.
One more. This might be stating the obvious, but if you're searching in the UK, you're going to be shunted by Google to that .co.uk suffix. So
Sure.
reserving the locality, the place where people are most likely to search for you, is obviously a given.
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, look, will be interesting to see. I can't believe Google didn't check alphabet.com was available. Maybe they just don't care, and are more concerned about the umbrella the companies they've got below the umbrella. It's a bit like having a holding company here. It's all right registering at Companies House, and that's what it's used for. So maybe they're more concerned about the major brands and businesses they're building under it. I'm sure someone would have done their homework there. I'm sure they've got more lawyers than most of us have got people in our companies. So
I think they'll rank okay for Alphabet.
Yeah. You don't think they'll start ranking the SERPs results alphabetically, do you?
Yeah, maybe.
Certainly, coming from a directory background, I used to.
That would be a really great sort option.
Yeah. Well, certainly from a directory perspective on branding, I used to work in the Yellow Pages industry here in the UK, yep. And you would see businesses, change their names to be AAA taxis or #1 AAA taxis, or Aardvark Consulting, just to get to the top of the list. So, people getting to the top of the list, whether it's search engine rankings or directory listings, it's been around for hundreds of years. So, okay, well, let's look at more original ways of optimizing your site. Let's move on and talk about the future of YouTube. It's now part of a smaller Google. Is YouTube an increasingly integral part of Google's future success? Is Facebook video or other video providers going to provide serious competition to YouTube? And in general, should most businesses be using video as part of their overall communication strategy? I think, Bill, you picked up on this first, so do you want to weigh in maybe with your general thoughts on the topic? And let's try and give our listeners here some really actionable tips and advice as their approach to incorporating video into their content marketing strategy.
Yeah, I think, with video, one of the big things that I think, and I think Rebecca touched on this, the mistakes they make is they decouple the two. One of the things that I've done over the years is, if we look at query data, we can start to see the type of things people are interested in. And the big one, and especially it ties to, how Google shows, or Bing especially, I think Bing does a better job around intent. So what is the intent of the query? And if the intent of the query is something related to how-to, not literally a how-to question, but has something related to how-to, videos show up. And Google often prioritize a video for that. And I think that's one thing. I think if a business steps back and what kind of material should we put into a video? How do we name it? How might someone look for it? And too many times I see, people put out these cutesy videos, behind the scenes video, where, nobody, unless they're looking for behind the scenes, are going to see how you made it, whether it's behind the scenes on a photo shoot for a magazine, or a video or something like that. While it's interesting content and it's great, supplemental content, especially if you look in YouTube. But I think, you know, the number one actionable thing is think about how someone might intersect with this video. What phrases might they actually use, and can we or should we either change our title and most definitely our description for that video to make sure it's findable in the context that people would be looking for it. So definitely things like how-to, different guides, those things, and each one of these has a different way that you might want to, you know, sort of reference that title and description. So it is findable both in Google as well as in YouTube.
And do you have some specific tips for people on, you know, how to do that keyword research? Are we talking about just going into AdWords or querying Google Also Suggest?
I think, you know, the I mean, all of those are great. So number one is obviously Keyword Planner, allows you to see exactly what people are looking for. And one of the things that I tell people do, and I think actually Rebecca and I are both on this panel at SMX where we talk to people about this, and the idea is you step in and say, what are they asking? And how many of these are questions? And in even things like a lot of people on their website themselves in their site search, what are they looking for on site search, and how can that be put into sort of an informational question? Auto-suggest is brilliant. You can use something like Uber Suggest, which is a really cool tool at ubersuggest.org where you simply put in a phrase and it simply appends, just like Auto-suggest, you know, A through Z and 1 through 10 to see those variations. And it's very interesting if you actually then go back and put in that intent, how to or why, or any of those type of variations, and you can see how the queries skew when you literally introduce a question or some sort of intent modifier into the keyword phrase. And I think, again, people aren't doing that, but, you know, as Rebecca said, that's the first place to start for content marketing. You know, start there, understand the universe of phrases that people are using to find something, and then from there you can decide what is the best asset type for it. Is it a video? Is it a web page? Is it a video or a you know, static web page? Is it an app? What is the experience that they should have? And I think start with that, open the lens, and then really try to understand what they're looking for and what they're asking for in those words. Just don't dump it out into Excel and say, here's my words, build content against it. Try to understand what asset type they need and best serves that particular query.
That's perfect. That's great. That's been great advice there, Bill. Does anyone else want to weigh in on that with some additional insights for people?
One thing that I encourage clients to do is to put transcripts in videos. This is something that people overlook to an embarrassing degree, and a video is so much more findable, keyword research aside. If it's talking heads video, an instructional video, a narrative video, if you simply transcribe the content of that video and put it on the page that contains the video. You know, Google is obviously developing closed caption technology in order to automate this process, but there's no reason why marketers have to wait for it. Getting this done is something that can be offshored, outsourced, and done very, very cheaply, and it certainly makes the video much more optimized.
Yeah, certainly. We do a transcript of this show, and I think it doesn't cost very much to do that every single week. So you know, it's good content. As you know, we slice and dice it and try and make it actionable for people. Andrew, what about from your perspective, or you work with a lot of local businesses? You know, should video be an integral part of their local marketing strategy?
Well, of course, it totally depends on the type of business they are. Most actually local service businesses, as an example, you know, run cable TV ads and things like that, so video is kind of natural. But we see with actually not even just local business, but even media companies we work with, they tend to underinvest in video. They throw a few things up, and you know, it gets 100 views, and they call it a day. And so I actually think that's one of the biggest challenges with video is convincing companies that they need to do. It's a program they need to run like any other and invest in like any other. I think a really good example, I always like to use this example, is Moz.com's Whiteboard Friday video, which is an incredibly inexpensive thing that they produce every Friday in, you know, someone's office. And you know, they've been doing it now for years, and it's basically a TV show, and it's built up a lot of credibility and brand loyalty, and anybody could do that. And so what I typically see is businesses underinvesting. And on the media side of things, what I also see is that there's an over-reliance on Google and on YouTube as a platform, and they're not using it as a real customer acquisition channel. They're just using it to get some kind of ad share from YouTube or just get a ton of views. And they're kind of trying to build their business on the back of YouTube instead of trying to drive people to their site and watch their video, not YouTube's video.
Okay, so if I've set up my local deli here in Twickenham, I've got a little bit of budget, and I want to do a great video about all the great pastries I'm making. What do I do? Do I get my local web developer to embed it on my website? Do I put it out on Facebook? Do I distribute it on YouTube? What practical steps and advice can you give the guys once they produce the content to get it out there, and hopefully generate leads and generate feet through the door?
Well, you kind of want to have a better understanding of where the customers are. It's easy to say they're all on YouTube or they're all on Facebook, but you want to be a little more targeted than that. Often we see these guys just throw this stuff up on they share it on Facebook, they put it up on YouTube. And that all might be fine, but if you really want to do a marketing program around your pastry video, because it's so awesome, I think you need to be a lot more focused in that. So maybe you want to run a boost campaign on Facebook that targets specific people who you think are your customers. Maybe you want to do some AdWords campaign around it, so you're not just kind of throwing it out there and waiting for it to kind of land.
Okay.
I definitely think you should put it on your site though, and use your own video hosting tools. Don't rely on YouTube.
Okay, so obviously no one can tell on a video how great the food tastes, but if we can do something really creative and exciting, and hopefully people will share it. What about for bigger companies? Bill, Rebecca, do you have any specific advice for those guys who might have a catalog? Take a software business like us. We've got a lot of content, about how to use different tools for different purposes. I think Bill's advice about really trying to solve customers' problems and understand what they're trying to do with how do I do this, what do I do this, what steps do I take to achieve this, is really useful in terms of getting the research and getting content production ideas. But once you've got this catalog, what do we do? Do we mark up the sites, video sitemaps? What are the kind of things that would you give guys in terms of the first 3 things they should do to try and get people to watch their content?
I'd say, one is take Andrew's advice, just put it anywhere and everywhere. Let's get it on my site. No matter what size company you are, but a bigger company, you often may have a press team. You may have a particular, sort of press room or media library or something like that, so you can list them there. So number 1, list them, get them on your website. Number 2, as you said, make sure you've got a good XML video sitemap so they can be fed out to the various search engines. Third, just start pointing people to them. And that's one of the things when you start to look at some of the factors that boost up videos. Number 1 is people embedding it, and that's a big frustration I see is nobody gives the embed code. For a long time, Cisco was touted as one of the best sort of multimedia, social media press release examples, and they went as far as actually in the bottom of it, especially in their press room, giving people where they could just right-click, grab the embed code, and put it on their page or Facebook or wherever. Second is make sure you're promoting it. You could have that brilliant, sort of pastry video, or one that I see a lot, going back to the keywords, probably the best sort of ecosystem piece that I ever worked on was for DuPont, where they make this. We went in, we did this research around granite and corian countertops, and right there in the keyword, it broke out. There was 80,000 searches a month for how to clean it, how to seal it, how to maintain it. It was everything there was how to. And every one of those begged for a video, not only showing literally how to do it, but how to use their product. Now, they don't sell anything direct. So what they did, to answer the original question, is they made sure everybody that sold their product was able to take those videos and then share it on their website, share it. Some people even put them in kiosks in store. So if you went into like a DIY store, you could actually push a button and see these videos that were created. So, number 1, get it out there. XML sitemaps, links, promotion through social media, and then let the market sort of take it from there.
Perfect. Okay, that's
and Bill's
great tips there.
excellent point loops back to your original question, which was where do you want videos to live, YouTube or Facebook? Facebook doesn't come with those capabilities. It's not easy to share a video that is on Facebook outside of Facebook's walled garden. And when you're talking about how-to videos for Corey and B2B videos, Facebook isn't necessarily the environment, which is why I advocate hosting the video on YouTube regardless, because YouTube can go into Facebook much more easily, of course, than the inverse of that equation.
Perfect. Okay, well, look, there's some great advice there. I think we could do a whole show on video alone, so maybe we'll invite you back at another time to talk about it in greater depth. But let's move on to topic 2. So thanks for your advice and insights around that. Apple and Google are both promoting deep linking in apps, but will this ever become mainstream SEO, or is app marketing a specialist discipline? And should this mean that more businesses should consider having apps? And is it going to make it harder for businesses without apps to compete? What do businesses need to do to take advantage of this? Who would like to come in on this first? Any of you out there working with clients, actively looking at this right now?
Yeah, we're actually doing a lot of work on this. We have a client that we're working with right now who's actually coming out with a product to help businesses work with iOS actually on this app indexing. So for those of you who already have a Mac or have OS 10, you know that it's already, and you're using Safari, you know that it's already kind of hijacking a ton of search queries. I can pretty much type in my browser right now the name of any local business, and the Apple Maps profile for that business will be the first thing that pops up as a suggestion to search. And we do a lot of work on Apple Maps as well, and we can see all of that content is getting filtered out throughout Apple's ecosystem. And so you don't need an app to compete in there. You just need to be inside of apps. So we don't just lurk on local businesses, but on the local business side of things, you need to be in Yelp's app, which is getting indexed pretty heavily in Apple Maps and in Safari and things like that. And it's not bad to have your own app strategy if you can get people to actually download your app and use it. But I don't know that I'd create an app just to optimize for Apple's app indexing.
Okay, but so where for local businesses, it's good to get distribution of their credentials and their name and address and telephone number, etc.
Yeah.
Consistently across different sites. Do that in the apps as well. Make sure you're listed in the apps.
Well, you should be at any case know what the strongest popular apps are in your niche, and make sure you have a presence in them. So if everyone your customers uses Yelp, you better make sure your Yelp data is all right.
Gotcha.
And I'd worry more about that than just this app indexing thing.
Okay. Andrew makes an interesting point, and I think it's a way people need to think about most apps. There are, of course, apps that are games and apps that are entertaining, but the preponderance of apps that people use for utility purposes are really mini vertical search engines. Yelp is nothing but a vertical search engine. So is Grubhub, so is Seamless. So are apps like Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate Finders or Zillow. Mm-hmm. So all of those linking tactics and all of that local information, all of that contact information are absolutely critical. And we're not just talking about a universe of phones right now. We're talking about an expanding universe, obviously, of screens, of tablets, of tablets, of in-store displays. So people are searching for information, not just on Google on laptops, but via apps, via a preponderance of different kinds of devices and screens, and search strategy needs to extend to those, whether we're talking about Google as the primary search engine or an app.
Okay, so I've got an in-house marketing team. Let's think maybe a bit bigger business than my deli. We've just got started, so we're not going to start creating our app straight away. We'll concentrate on making decent pastries. But a slightly bigger business, maybe got an in-house marketing team, maybe they outsource their work to an agency. I mean, do they need a specialist to come in and help them with this? What advice would you give people who've got an app already, maybe got some traction with it, in terms of making sure that their app surfaces and results for users?
I think that's the answer. Does it surface? Back to Andrew's point, are you findable? Is your stuff, whether you're the deli or you're somebody like HP, am I findable in whatever people are using? And I think that's the gap. And your original question, will this be part of mainstream SEO or will this be part of a strategy? I think it's going to be a niche for a while, because like anything else, unless it's sort of hacking links or title tags or some other sort of flavor of the day for SEO, most people don't consider this stuff sort of mainstream. And I think, not to get on a rant about our industry, but I think that that's the big flaw we have, is we often think about things in silos, although we bitch about companies thinking in silos.
True.
And so, we take these, and not to sort of put Andrew in a corner because they focus on local, but as he said, it's the whole ecosystem. Anything related to finding something local is the concept. So if you have something that should be local, it should be there. On apps, if you think about how an app might work and what is the intent of person. So somebody that like drinks. So for example, Absolute Vodka has a drink site and they also have a drink app. And in the app, what we wanted to make sure is if somebody was looking for a drink, especially if they were on a mobile phone, we wanted to make sure that that cocktail was findable in the app on their phone. And so that's the thing that the engines were starting to see. And if you look at, especially on the Android side, they actually have these intent filters where what's the intent of someone's query that they did, and what should they get? Should they get the home page? Should they get an address page? Should they get a product page, or should they get some other piece of asset? And I think if we think about that in the big picture, that takes all this stuff out of a niche and makes it essentially the strategy of findability. And so if we are someone that has a local presence, then all of these pieces need to be part of that strategy. If you're a multinational with a global presence, not only is it global, but it's local within all those things. And then are we in the various directories? Are we in our OEM provider directories if we're talking about a mid-sized company? Are we findable, and is our data correct? And that's one thing I think a lot of people don't do. They look to see, yes, I'm there. I'm in Yelp, but maybe the address is wrong or the phone is wrong, phone number is wrong. So those are the kind of things I think is the next step that someone, either the company needs to do or their agency needs to do for them.
Okay, well, look, that's great. And Andrew, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I think the challenge so I'm focused on local right now because that's where a lot of this activity is happening, but it's actually not just a local thing. And I think this is what we saw in local is that everyone ignored Apple Maps because they thought it sucked, and no one realized that 100 million people are using it. And so people ignored it, people are using it, they need to start working with it. And I have a feeling this is what's going to happen with this app indexing on iOS 9 is it's going to be there in October, and hundreds of millions of people are going to start to use it. And we don't know yet if we type. Let's take the vodka thing, like how to make a martini, a vodka martini. If you type in Safari in iOS 9 how to make a vodka martini, and the first result is an app suggestion, to Bill's point, then you're going to have to start to think about not just findability in your app, but do you actually have that content in your app, because that's what customers are looking for, that's what Apple's showing you. And then who knows how they're going to rank which app to show there. Is it the app that the person has on their phone? Is it the most popular app in the App Store? Is it because someone wrote a review that said this has how to make a martini in it? And so I think all these things are going to need to be figured out because it's going to have an impact. It's not going to be a niche.
So there's multiple layers of optimization. It's making sure you come up in the results within the app, and then within the app, maybe you have to pay the Yellow Pages company, the Yelp, to get to the top of the listing.
Well, if Yelp's showing up for those queries all the time, then yeah, you probably will want to do something with Yelp.
Okay, well look, there's again probably another show on that at a later date, maybe around October time. It'll be really interesting. But Andrew, I'm very conscious of the fact that you're going to have to head off in 5 minutes, and I know what caught your eye this week was the changes Google's made and rolled out globally in terms of local pack from going to 7 to 3. So do you want to talk a little bit about the ramifications for that for businesses, what you're seeing, and maybe some advice for people, your parting shot before you head off?
So there are maybe two or three big ramifications. So the number one ramification we see is that actually this hasn't changed much of anything, because we've been monitoring a lot of local businesses, a lot of directories that we work with that rank for these queries, and we haven't seen much change in traffic or phone calls That said, it's a big change because what you see is the display now is heavily oriented towards ratings, showing ratings and review information. So getting ratings and reviews for your business, good ones, is probably more important than ever. And then where I think the big ramification is for SEO consultants, because they were probably last week touting that they got a business to rank number 4 in the local results and how great that was on page 1, and now they don't show up, and they're going to have to explain that, oh, it's really not a big deal. So don't worry about it. So I think it's kind of shifting how we're kind of talking about this stuff to clients for sure.
Okay, so if I was, I came to you today with my new business, my deli, and said to you, Andrew, I need to rank in Google locally and the other search engines. What practical steps could you give me in terms of advice? Well, do this, do this, do this.
First, I'd say we'd say this before this happened, but don't just think about local, but local in terms of the local results, those local pack results, but think about it in terms of local organic results, because there's now more than ever you need to rely on those versus trying to get into the pack. But the advice is still the same. You have to have an optimized site, understand how to optimize your site for local, like target local keywords, have local schema on your site, that kind of thing. You need to make sure you have all your citations, your local business listings on all the key sites that Google looks at consistent. Your data needs to be consistent. You need to have a claimed, well-optimized, well-categorized Google My Business page, and you need to get backlinks. And
perfect.
That's pretty much it. That's local SEO in a nutshell.
Plenty decent quality ones. Okay. So just before you head off, I'm very conscious of the fact that you've got to go. So how can people contact you if they want to learn more about local search and talk to you and your company about all the great work you've done for your clients? How can they find you? Where should they contact you?
So localseoguide.com. There's a contact form. You could hit me up on Twitter at localseoguide. You can email me at andrew@localseoguide.com.
Perfect. Okay. Well, that brings us nicely to sort of the midway break in the show. So I'm going to let you sign off. I'm going to press this button.
Thanks, guys.
Music, and thanks ever so much for joining us. And for the second half of the show, Bill and I and Rebecca will talk about the other topics. So thanks ever so much, Andrew, and we'll speak to you soon.
You're listening to This Week in Organic, live from London, on thisweekinorganic.com.
Okay, so it's just Bill and Rebecca. We're halfway through. You're doing great, guys. Some great actionable tips you've been sharing with people. So coming up, we're going to talk about whether Pinterest is a social media platform or an e-commerce opportunity. We'll also be diving into 7 social media platforms that could explode before 2016. And we're also going to talk about, hopefully if we get time, some of the other topics that caught your eye this week. But first of all, there's going to be no live This Week in Organic show next week. Believe it or not, I've let David go on holiday. So the next live show will be on Friday the 28th of August. But fear not, he's recorded a special webinar, a recent show on international SEO with 3 leading experts in the field, and it's going to be published on the Analytics SEO blog and on our podcast at thisweekinorganic.com/iTunes next Friday the 21st of August. So please tune in then and watch it, and hopefully you'll see David back here in a couple of weeks' time. Please keep on using the hashtag TWIO on Twitter and sharing the show. Matthew from autotrader.co.uk did, so thank you for that, and that's why you get a mention. That reminds me, I'm going to sell my Audi on AutoTrader very soon, so it's given me so much trouble recently. And if you want to mention for your show in your business, start sharing using the hashtag TWIO on Twitter, and I'll try and give you a mention next time. So moving on to the next topic, which is Pinterest. Is Pinterest a social media platform or an e-commerce opportunity? Apparently,
yes.
Okay. Okay, hold your horses. And it apparently has 2.5 million items that are now buyable. Does this change what Pinterest is about and make it into a different type of network? What's its future? And what should businesses be doing and considering from a marketing perspective? Should Pinterest be part of its strategy? Rebecca, you were very eager to jump in there. So why don't you take it away? What actionable advice can you give for people around Pinterest?
Well, I wanted to answer your either-or question with a yes, because the answer is very clearly yes. It's both a social network and an e-commerce platform. And Pinterest has made very definitive moves in that direction just over the last 3 to 4 months. I've been privileged to work with Pinterest on this to a limited extent. I was there keynoting their event when they invited developers in, because they finally made that move in social media maturity when you open up your API. And when you open up your API to other developers, you're creating new possibilities. In Pinterest's case, there's obviously an enormous commerce potential there. There's an enormous potential for native advertising, a term that Pinterest itself doesn't like, but that's frankly what it is. Yeah. And Pinterest is a place where people go to consider purchases, to aspire to purchases, very lifestyle-centric kind of social media play.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. What kind of products are we seeing sold on Pinterest? What do you think is going to go well in terms of the Bible pins there? So, very anecdotally, what I see Pinterest using, what I understand when I talk to Pinterest executives, is its projects. And a project might be a redecorating project. Lots and lots of people are using it for home remodeling, home decorating projects. In fact, that was a very early indicator. Pinterest has got still an overwhelmingly female audience, but that's changing very, very rapidly. It's almost gone the opposite way of most new internet platforms, which first have a predominantly male audience, and then the chicks catch up. Pinterest has been maybe the one example I can think of that's gone the other way. Yeah. But people are also planning vacations on Pinterest. So if they're going to climb a mountain or hike the Appalachian Trail or scale Kilimanjaro, they're planning what gear they need, what they need to buy, what equipment is necessary. They're also doing this for sports projects. So this can be quite an accumulation of brands and of merchandise, and I'm seeing brands get in there with very aspirational buys, and it's a natural for anybody selling home remodeling stuff. Bill, this goes back to your Corian countertops, but also brands like REI, who might be selling sporting equipment and outdoors gear. Perfect. Okay. And so in terms of, if I'm a brand and I'm interested in getting some of my content out there, should I be, approaching these Pinterest users who are building these boards and trying, a bit like the old-fashioned link building technique, trying to get them to place some of my imagery in there and include me as part of their boards? I mean, what strategies, bless you, what strategies should brands be taking to take advantage of the audience there and their purchasing power?
Well, Pinterest would certainly like to partner with you and have you advertise, or at least advertise in a very content-centric, native way on the platform. But brands might do well to first experimentally dip their toes in the water, so to speak, and have very conversational, social, content-driven channels on Pinterest to drive interest and to see what kind of content on Pinterest might be resonating with their target user or users.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so some interesting thing there. It's interesting that you've got a slight sort of insider view from having done a little bit of work with them. What about yourself, Bill? Have you done much work on Pinterest with your clients? So have you got any practical advice for people out there?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to my point earlier about findability. And I think, as Rebecca was saying, I mean, with the travel. So I just give you a personal example. We're basically taking the family to scuba dive in Bali in November. And, both kids, first place they went to see what should I see in Bali was, went to Pinterest. And started things on temples in Bali or beaches in Bali, and you could see the pictures, and then the pictures they could click through and get more information, and that was an interesting thing. And so I looked to see, could have any of these travel companies, and there was a few that were actually putting out brilliant content to let people see what they could do. Things that I've done, again going back to Absolute Drinks, what we find is the what's new area, and I think Rebecca's example about REI or any sports outfitter, as you have new gear for specific verticals, whether it's climbing or hiking, introducing it there. I think that's a fair place to do it because you're putting it out in a what's new category. And we do that with drinks so that people can see it, and we let the sort of ecosystem take over. You'll have people that are, looking for content. So you'll get a blogger, or you'll get somebody that's sort of an influencer in Pinterest. Will see it, they'll take it, and they'll distribute it. Other big things, I think, that we don't see a lot of retailers necessarily having the pin it button on product pages. And that's where, again, especially in some of these areas like travel or sports, and especially in interior design and things like weddings is another big one we see. And so if you have content, just simply putting the pin where people can actually pin it and go out there. We found that if you start really sort of pimping stuff to people, and you do it outside of that community scenario, you're just simply blatantly promoting it, we find a lot of people don't like that. And the success ratio of getting someone to propagate your content is very low. So again, I think if you step back and think we've got a new product launch especially, or we've got, we can go in and mine that data and see that there's a lot of projects set up for whatever it is, sort of a trek to Kilimanjaro, or we used it before we went to Africa to see what were some of the sort of insect, proof clothing and stuff like that. And what we found was it was a very mixed bag of things. So I think, yeah, hitting influencers, giving people just the opportunity to push it there. And now it's good to see that they're actually trying to be able to monetize that. Can people click through and buy a bottle of Absolute Citron, or can they click through to REI and buy, some lightweight pack or something for a particular type of trip that someone has posted there? So I think it's only going to grow, and as a lot of people are starting to be conditioned to visually see things, I think that they've got an amazing opportunity for businesses that do it the right way.
So that sort of some of that ties into the content marketing strategy stuff we talked around with video earlier. You've done your homework, you've done your research into your, let's not call it keyword research, let's call it audience research. What are my audience looking for? What kind of topics, what interests them? How practically can I help them with the expertise I've got? And you do that once, and that serves you well for Pinterest. It serves you well for SEO strategy. It serves you well for your video marketing strategy. So for me, that's where I can see all these things gelling together, and obviously the marketeers or the decision maker, the CMO's decision as to how much they allocate to each channel is obviously a challenge, and I'm sure it will vary from business to business. But in terms of Pinterest, I wonder, I asked the question about, perhaps paid links. We've been in the SEO industry for a while. There's obviously been a lot of paid links bought over the years. Obviously, we've never bought any ourselves. But do you see, you see people on YouTube now becoming producers and earning money? Do you see that could potentially be an avenue for people producing content professionally for companies on Pinterest if they're not doing it already, and making money, or people paying for product placement that's not obvious to consumers? Is that an avenue that you think that might happen, or organically, or Pinterest might promote even?
I think absolutely. I think, back to Rebecca's point, especially in interior design, imagine a designer, especially an emerging designer. So if you look at all these YouTube stars, and most of them were just people that simply sat down in front of their computer, with a digital camera or even their iPhone, and started producing stuff. And people liked either their slant on it or whatever. So imagine if you're an emerging designer and you were sort of speccing out someone's house. It's one of these things where even before you go into a pitch, why couldn't you assemble things there on Pinterest and maybe sort of use that as a crowdsourcing way to tell maybe this potential client what people liked in there. I think it's there. I think that, again, I think businesses don't think this way. And you made the point of, if we aggregate this data, we should aggregate, what's been pinned in Pinterest, what type of videos are out there in YouTube. But unfortunately, many companies don't. We actually call this the voice of the consumer. So it's not keyword research, but it's looking at all of these digital signals, conversational mining and social media. But to answer the question, I do think it's going to start to emerge once people pick up. And this drinks case, for example, there's a friend of mine whose husband is a emerging mixologist, and then she was doing Pinterest at a Fortune 500 company, and basically she showed him how to use Pinterest so that he could create these interesting and exotic drinks. And I know a couple of these drinks companies have actually brought him in as a result of what they saw that he produced on Pinterest. So I do think it's there. I just don't think there's enough outsiders monetizing it like you can in YouTube. The whole sort of backlash we just had on Kim Kardashian pimping some pregnancy or some morning sickness drug. I think, too many brands want that. And too many brands aren't thinking. I think it's like your deli. Do you have a customer that comes in every morning and has or comes in every afternoon, has a coffee, and has one of your pastries, and maybe they take a quick picture on their mobile phone. Giving that person a free pastry or something and let them sort of put it up on the channel makes them sort of your evangelist. Yeah. Those are the kind of things I think are going to start to happen.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I'd also like to add to that what we're seeing and what my research as an analyst is bearing out is that content is incontrovertibly becoming more visual and more audio-visual. And that's what we've been talking about here today in terms of talking about both Pinterest and talking about YouTube. The other way that content is going, and the other place that CMOs and SVP marketing and heads of digital are trying to align their content is with mobile, because increasingly we're using devices that travel, not devices that are chained to our desktops. And we've seen very important social platforms like Instagram pop up. We've seen Facebook redesign twice and do so over a preponderance of images and videos and lessen the amount of text that's happening. SEO is effectively a very text-reliant way of marketing, but SEOs are going to have to increasingly optimize images and video in order to stay competitive, because on smaller screens, pictures are worth the proverbial 2,000 words or 100 words. So it's important to just look at the broader picture when we're talking about Pinterest, when we're talking about YouTube, and realize everything's going in this direction. Nobody wants to read War and Peace on their watch.
No, sure. And just on that point, we've obviously talked about a lot of topics today, and again, Pinterest could probably be another show in its own right. You mentioned earlier about APIs, and are you seeing anything? Can you point to any interesting apps that have mashed up other data from other sources to give people the best of maybe directory data and Pinterest images for these local projects? Is there anything that's worth mentioning there?
There's very little these days that doesn't have an API. I just did a survey of the content marketing landscape. This is about 200 different software providers. I identified 8 different workflow scenarios in terms of content marketing. There was literally not a single tool out there that didn't have APIs, because no software, no tool, no platform lives in a vacuum. You need to integrate everything with web analytics, perhaps with a CRM system, with your search platform if you're using one, with other marketing cloud applications. So everything is a link in a much, much bigger chain, much as the internet is this network of interconnected sites and information. So too now is the software landscape and the tools that help us to get there and to leverage this amazing platform out there.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll certainly endorse that. I mean, yeah, we've spent a lot of time building and developing APIs, so certainly you can't get by on your own. It's an integrated world out there, and obviously you need integrated marketing campaigns to take your business, whether it's a big enterprise or a local deli or a software company, to the next level. So that leads us on to the final article. We're just getting towards the end of the show now. So finally, Forbes published an article called 7 Social Media Platforms That Could Explode Before 2016. And they are, I think, Wanalo, which is a Pinterest rival, SlideShare, which is sharing sort of PowerPoint slides, Shots, which is some sort of Instagram and Snapchat love child, ELLO, E-L-L-O, the Annie advertising social network, Hyper, which is Instagram and Reddit combined with voting, and Bebo, which is some sort of hashtag Bebo Reborn, a hashtag-powered avatar messenger, and then this, where you can just share one link a day, so it sort of cuts through all the rubbish and the noise out there and focuses on highly curated, very relevant content. Are any of them going to explode? Have you got any advice for anyone who's talking about these kind of things? What are your thoughts on them generally?
My thoughts are to look at the history of other platforms that have both risen and fallen. MySpace seemed like it was unconquerable several years back, and now nobody talks about it. Foursquare is another social platform that's declined into near obsolescence. Ella was very hot when they had a velvet rope around it, and quite frankly, I forgot all about it until you mentioned it again today.
Okay.
SlideShare is legacy. It's been around forever. So this is almost like comparing apples and oranges. But when I remember a lot of media queries when Facebook went public, and they were saying, is Facebook going to be the next Google? Well, Facebook isn't Google to start out with. But the other question is it going to be the next AOL? Is it going to be the next Yahoo? So the life cycle of all of these digital platforms is very, very rapid, and the flameouts are very, very quick. So I disagree with Forbes's premise that you can look at what's going to be hot going forward into an indefinite future. This is going to continue to ebb and fall. It's very, very difficult to predict. It's marketers' jobs to stay on top of these trends, not necessarily to look into crystal balls, which are almost always very, very murky.
Okay, so you've just got to keep your eye on the ball and, back the horse at the right time, but don't back all the horses straight away.
And to look at where your customers are, because jumping onto a platform without a strategy is tactical and usually very short-sighted.
Okay. And Bill, any thoughts on that and that interesting list of names?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, for me, the only one that really stands out, I think, from really more from a B2B would be something like SlideShare. I think that, people have known about it. I think it's sort of a way to tie in with other applications. You mentioned APIs. None of these really caught my attention or have caught my attention to where I might want to invest. And I think it's exactly as Rebecca said, is that, have some of these even verticals sort of jump the shark, meaning they're sort of, it's like a Me Too, but not a better Me Too. And I think that's going to be some of the drivers is, an LO sounded really good, or, a few of these sound good without advertising. But without advertising, how are you going to grow? How are you going to make money? So I think some of those are sort of problematic from the beginning, and that's going to sort of restrain some of the marketers. But, yeah, I think, find some of the pain points. I don't think any of these solve any of this sort of complaints and criticisms of anybody using sort of their, the mainstream version of any of these applications now. So until we get that, until we get a better Google or we get a better Facebook, it's, they're going to be there, and I think a lot of these just going to burn through a lot of investors' money and, not necessarily be something that's a game changer.
Okay, so this, they might burn through investors' money, but don't let them burn through your marketing money just yet. Okay, so look, it's an interesting way to end the show. We always like to look forward and see what's out there, just to try and give our customers and visitors and users out there perhaps a slight advantage. I'm just getting towards the end of the show, the official topics, but you mentioned at the beginning of the show a couple of things that caught your eye. Bill, you mentioned the hreflang notices, the wonky ones that have been going out from Google's Search Console team. Did you want to just touch on that, and perhaps can you give some people some sensible advice on what they should be doing? I know we've had some and we've looked at them. What should people be doing?
I think one, this from the beginning, if you have multiple languages or multiple versions on, say, a .com with a /country code, absolutely look at href. This is one of the areas where it is a problem. There's some quirky things like, in your case, most people, the number one error that I saw came back was people were using the country of UK, and you have to use GB. So it's actually a region code versus a country. And so that was probably the biggest error I saw. And the second one is people aren't mapping them. And I think Google hasn't done a good job of explaining this, where, if you have 5 versions of an English language site, all 5 of those need to sort of reference the other. And that was probably the second biggest error that I saw. So if you have a UK and a US, you have to basically make each other the alternative of the other. And that's something I don't think people are doing, and there's a bunch of sort of freeware attempts to do this, but they're not necessarily working, and a few of them are actually have caused a lot of these problems. But step back, read it very carefully. You're essentially, the premise is that this is the alternative of the other, and make sure that that's exactly how your files or your references in your pages are being done, and those errors will go away as soon as you fix those 2 things. You have the right country code and the right language code, as well as the right mapping.
And what should they be doing in actually, I keep wanting to call it Google Webmaster Tools, I still haven't got around to calling it Google Search Console, but what should they be doing in there? For, if I've got 5 different English language versions, I've got UK, US, Australian, should I be setting specific geographies for them?
Absolutely. Set the geography, and actually that's what Href did, is it took it to the next level. If we took, say, Switzerland, for example, where you have multiple languages, previously we could really only set one version for Switzerland. Now with this we can set multiple, but yeah, in Search Console, Webmaster Tools, set each one. The UK is the UK part of the site /UK to the UK, Australia to Australia. That's a great signal. And then on top of that, go ahead and use the Href. Probably the biggest value is that someone in Australia, because your US site or UK site may be dominant, that may actually be showing up in Australia. And even though you've set the geo-targeting for /AU to be Australia, as soon as you evoke this Href functionality, we're seeing with as quickly as 48 hours to as much as 2 weeks, it swaps it out almost immediately. The UK page will be there, the US the Australia page will be where it's supposed to be. The other English language market will sort of drop out of there. And so it's a very, very powerful tool when you use it correctly.
Perfect. And what we always talk about Google. What about the other search engines? Should you be logging into their Webmaster Tools consoles?
You should. Yandex uses this, and Bing does it to some point, but really nobody else is really adopting this. Obviously, Baidu in China, they want things to be in China primarily. So it is one of these things that not everybody's caught on to, but definitely in Bing you can go in and set your language functions for that. I think it is the under cared about search engine, and the fact that it's powering Yahoo and there's so much potential traffic that can come in, I do think you need to go in and look at Bing as well.
Okay, perfect. Any thoughts on international SEO while we're on the topic? Rebecca, from your perspective, and general advice you'd want to give people?
I think Bill is, frankly, a better expert on it, as is his lovely wife, Motoko, than I am. What I've been working on a lot lately is international content strategies, which feeds into that. What types of content do you want localized? What come from the mothership, from the parent office? Whose job is it to produce and approve at the country level, at the regional level, at the city level? These are some of the very complex tasks I've been working on lately with multinational corporations that all are going to feed into both global and national search strategies.
Okay, well, we're getting right to the end of the show. So, Rebecca, you mentioned at the beginning of the show we were talking about strategies and content strategies and SEO. What are your thoughts on bigger businesses where they've got a content team, perhaps, or an editorial team and an SEO team, as to how to get them to work together in the best way and how to secure the right level of budget to get the right content marketing strategy? Any tips and advice? Any pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah, I'm seeing the pitfalls right now happen at the most senior level of marketing. I conducted research interviewing about 75 very top level Fortune 100, Fortune 500 CMOs, SVPs, heads of digital, and I asked them what their priorities were with content marketing. Only one of them mentioned SEO. 0 of them mentioned email, which is also content. I think that currently senior executives, senior marketers have their eyes on bright, shiny objects very much at the expense of the fundamental toolkits. And as a result, I'm seeing content marketing copywriters who have absolutely no training or background in SEO, videos going up with none of the optimization concerns that we discussed, transcripts, thought to titles, keyword research in the tagging. And it's time to marry the two practices back together again. Content is a relatively new discipline. It most frequently doesn't live in its own department, but is spread throughout the organization, perhaps in social, perhaps in PR, perhaps in comms. And I'm seeing that change very, very rapidly. Just in the past few weeks, my phone's ringing with headhunters who are looking for senior content executives. It's important to make search and email and these now very standard parts of the marketing arsenal feedback into the bigger picture and feedback into the broader marketing purview. They're fundamental, they're foundational, and they can't be forgotten in this rush to the next new thing. They're still integral.
Okay, well, look, that's some great thoughts there, and again, probably another show. I think we've created topics for about at least 6 or 7 other shows now, but we really are getting right to the end of time. Certainly in the UK, it's must be approaching 5 o'clock, which is when most people in businesses knock off for a pint at the end of a hard-working week. Unfortunately, you guys can't join us for one, but I look forward to sharing one with you next time I'm over in the States, probably at SMX, where we normally congregate. So I'd just like to say that really does take us to the end of this week's show. Really just a time for a single takeaway from you both. And please, repeat your details. How can people get in contact with you if they want to talk to you some more about some of the issues that we've talked about today? So I'll come to you first, Bill.
Sure. I think my biggest takeaway, what we heard from everyone, is think about the marketing ecosystem and how to make all of your assets findable. That's the big thing I think we heard today. To find me, I'm at Bill Hunt on Twitter. You can reach me at bill@back-azimuth.com or any of the number of other sort of social media ways on the web. And if you have questions or anything, let me know.
Perfect. Thanks very much. And last but certainly not least, Rebecca.
I think my takeaway is visual and audiovisual content is very much on the ascendant, and it very much needs to be optimized, and it needs to work across screens and across platforms. You can find me at RebeccaLieb.com and on all the obvious social networks. Always happy to talk search and especially content strategy and content marketing.
Perfect. Well, I do hope lots of people get in touch with you. Certainly we'll be sending any queries we have of today's show over to you guys. That brings us to the end of the show. I hope I've done a reasonable job of stepping in for David at short notice, and we give the best to him and to his wife. Thank you ever so much for joining us, and also to Andrew Shotland as well. So I'm Lawrence O'Toole at analyticsseo.com. You can also catch David online, interviewing online marketing gurus at digitalmarketingradio.com. And if you're watching the show as a recording, remember to watch the next episode live. Head over to thisweekinorganic.com and sign up to watch the next show in real time. For those of you out there, we're also on YouTube, so please go to thisweekinorganic.com/iTunes, and please continue sharing your thoughts using the hashtag #TWIO on Twitter. That's just a 4-letter hashtag TWIO. So until next time, Bill, Rebecca, and to Andrew, thank you, and everyone out there for joining us. You've been fantastic. Adios, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.